Somehow New York became relevant to the brightest spirits in France, and Paris became relevant to the brightest spirits in America. Now, France went through a spiritual death during the First World War, and the freshness and tenderness that sprang up in so much of the outrageous art of the 1920s was a resurrection, a rebirth. The fact that Americans found all this so compelling suggests that our culture also was experienced death in the period, a somewhat different death, and perhaps we're still in the throes of it. We still find spiritual nourishment in the Paris of half a century ago. The Dadaists, as I said before, regarded capitalism, imperialism, and religion as their foes. Certainly, American life has been closely entwined with those forces in this century. I will not make further parallels now. That would be too hard or too easy. But I would like to say that the 20th century art that you know, the painting, the literature, and music, came out of this period. And I would like to point out to an American who lives as a musician and who dreams every day of fruitful collaboration with the other arts, the spectacle of Paris in 1920 is partly painful. The spectacle of all that happened. Cocteau could get Diaghilev or Chanel to support extravagant projects involving dance and literature and art and music, the histories of which are haunting to me. Such projects were developed with relative ease, and the milieu was more permissive. One could fail and yet succeed. Parade lasted only 2 nights and made its principals into famous people. It was no golden age, and much of the glitter was false, as it often is. But the artists had self-respect. They needed their benefactors, but they didn't need to bury them in triplicate supplications. They had time to think and drink and talk. They had that leisure and measure that Owen Wilson wrote about to Scott Fitzgerald. And what vitality the period had. All this is what has drawn me to Paris in the 1920s, but there is no more Paris like that, not even in France. In this lecture, I'm touching on controversial issues, dealing with touchy and awkward notions. I'm being embarrassing and leaving myself open to embarrassment. But I want to ask some of the questions that need asking about the relationship of music to the rest of life. And you should bear in mind that I ask them as a composer, someone who is in the middle of notes and pen and paper, someone who composed this morning.